Hi everyone, welcome to Core Unit Launching Pod Sessions number 3. Today we have the Smart Contracts Core Unit. So Derek is joining us to present a bit their mandate, budget, and well, himself as the facilitator. Hopefully we can get into the talks with that. Just as a very quick reminder, so the vesting topic was I wouldn't call it controversial, but it was heated up. So today we'll try to focus mainly on the smart contracts core unit implementation, and not on vesting in general for the maker community. That's something that we will discuss in the coming days. So without further ado, Derek, if you want to maybe introduce yourself.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully you guys can see my screen as a starting point. My name's Derek Flossman, so I'm putting myself forward as the proposed smart contract team core unit facilitator. I've worked side by side with the smart contract team on all sorts of things from instant access modules, documenting DSS Gov. We worked on migrations, so SI to DI, also worked on Chief 1.2. I've likewise done a lot of work with the front end team. And yeah, so with that, today I will be talking about the smart contract team. And if I can go to the next slide, there we go. Okay, so first of all, yeah, let's introduce the team. On the right side of the screen, you'll see the team is made up of 9 individuals from Chris, Brian, Kurt, Gonzalo, Sam, Naz, Emilio, Tanner, and myself. So currently 9 people. We actually have included 5 open positions in the budget MIP. And the really cool news here is that we've actually attracted some attention from the industry, and we're discussing with 2 individuals a potential position, some potential involvement. And I bring that up because I think it's really important to have a proposition and a ground to stand on that really attracts people to the platform and gets people involved and really wanting to participate. So I think that's really cool. I should have probably first started off with the background of the team and the fact of their comprehensive understanding of blockchain fundamentals, security architecture, consensus algorithms, formal modeling, verification, and of course, Solidity and Ethereum development experience that all of these guys have, and that they all bring to the table and have a lot of experience specifically with Maker. So I'm sure you've all seen them in the chats, and they're all familiar faces that you've seen. So one thing I did want to do before we sort of jump into the more operational work of what we do was just focus briefly on some of the team philosophy and values, because I think it helps ground like how we focus on problems, how we discuss them, and our general the values of the team and how we go about our work. So the first one, maintaining an open forum for discussion. Like I said, you'll see us on the forum, on the Rocket chat, discussing everything Maker related. And we're also unafraid to voice our concerns. We are all MKR holders and participants in governance. So we are unafraid of voicing those concerns and really trying to put forward what we feel is best for the protocol. And I think that comes across in a lot of our exchanges and discussions around what is optimal for development going forward. We continue to maintain active relationships with auditors and support community bug bounties. It's also something that we've supported going forward in the MIP proposal. Of course, in sticking with engineering practices, our source is open code. Our code is open source for broader adoption and promoting ecosystem growth. Also to help with integrations and partners to make sure that we get a broader growth of the usage of modules and so on. And also we aim to consistently raise the bar for safety and correctness. So setting the standard for excellence in protocol design and implementation. And I raised this one specifically around safety because in the coming slides, you'll see that I've drawn out security and correctness as its own, I guess, vertical, you could say, which underpins other aspects of growth and maintenance as also other verticals. But we'll get into that in a few slides' time. So continuing along, again, with the concept of engineering standards, engineering practices, making sure that we rely on industry standards and unit tests when deploying code. We also make sure that this code is modularized to keep smart contracts simple and the attack surface is small. It also helps, again, integrators build their own modules, integrate with the system. And we also, even though we're a geographically dispersed team, we recognize the value in paired programming. And a lot of that is also asynchronous peer reviews to deliver space-grade code. And this also ties into some of the future slides that I want to bring up here, in the sense that there's this phasing between growth work and innovation, and on the other hand, the execution and implementation work. That's really where this notion of space-grade code comes into play, because that's the maintenance, the operational, getting things done and out the door, where it really counts, and that we place a lot of value and multiple peer reviews and assessments on. And of course, we have to keep a tight coupling with the risk team and the community to manage protocol risk and exposure. And finally, continuously review and improve engineering practices. So make sure that we employ a model of empirical learning and make sure that we can pivot when we see opportunities for improvement when they're necessary or when they're possible. So with that,
do we have any questions or comments up to now? I think it's quite clear, but maybe there are.
Yeah, right. I have a question. It's about the team size. Why are you planning to grow to specifically 14 people and not like, say, 24 or any other figure?
Yeah, good question.
So I mean, I can kind of answer that if you want.
Go for it, Chris. So, I can jump in after.
So I mean, I'm not gonna lie that the 14 numbers like moderately picked out of a hat, but it's mostly picked out of a hat out of like my experience with engineering teams and how large a team can get before you get diminishing returns on sort of headcount. And also, if you're more constrained in the number of headcount that you have, you tend to also hire the like absolute top tier that you can possibly find. So the more constrained you are, rather than a sort of shotgun approach for talent, you end up interviewing people that are engaged and enthusiastic and also like high skilled, and it allows, like, I don't know, for a better selector, right? Finite resources means you're gonna spend them where it matters. And so, but aside from that, I think we can go above 14. I think 14 is only the opening target, but we don't wanna just say 25 and then just hire a bunch of people that are, you know, maybe uninspired or not that interested, or maybe not, you know, the top tier. So, yeah, that's where we landed on that number to start with.
All right,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I think I just add to that well, we can talk about it in the following slides, because I do have a slide around like potential evolution and how we see certain areas growing around security, for example, and what that could mean down the line. But it felt like a good number to bring on potentially juniors to grow the team and facilitate the getting out more of the, for example, collateral onboarding, and just making sure we're able to move a bit quicker with what we have in the backlog at the moment and where we see it going. So I just wanted to here recap what we had in the original MIP, just a little bit how we are taking what was on the previous slide and how we actually put that into action with the ways of working. We operate on a two-week sprint cadence that allows us to be responsive to community votes and the market changes, which in crypto is very often and very quick. You'll be familiar with the weekly update we do on the governance and risk call that Chris does with regards to discussing progress, achievements, challenges, and roadblocks. One that we haven't done before, we have intermittently done it within the foundation, but I'd like to make it more of a formal process, and that is setting quarterly objectives and key results. The reason I think this is really important is because it will help document not only within the team, but across the teams what our priorities are, and knowing those priorities that roll up within the DAO will help us focus better, and it'll help communication of what we are actually delivering. Another idea that I have here is maintaining an innovation pipeline. So being able to communicate priorities and help synchronize mandated actors. So what I'm getting at here is that we have the MIP tracker, which I think is reviewed with the mandated actors, but I feel that's quite a narrow group, and there's a lot of questions that go to that group that could potentially be broader and more open for the rest of the stakeholders and governance participants. So I don't have a specific template of what this may look like, but the idea is to have an innovation pipeline, perhaps show what priorities are over the longer term, and build up a backlog of work that is sized and prioritized, and that really feeds into what we have as these objectives and key results. And with those objectives and key results, we really need to make sure that they're measurable as per standard OKR practice, and that ladders up into what I've got here as governance priorities. So essentially discussed with the community, and I think we can leverage our governance polling process to illustrate what those are, and use that as a mechanism to have these guideposts that will indicate what work we are focusing on. And with that, I think the summary here is, it's all about communications from the team, specifically from me, to keep the stakeholders updated and informed as to what is happening. So in terms of how we work today, we have the weekly update. We don't have OKRs, and we don't really have an innovation pipeline that is, I think, openly transparent to everyone in the community. So hoping that by having a focus on those two additional items, we'll be able to improve this. And of course, also be able to measure it. So how do we put this all into practice with regards to what the smart contracts team do? And this is coming up to the assisting with the maintenance and operation of existing smart contracts. So maintenance and operation being the key piece here, extending the functionality of the Maker protocol, and ensuring the safety and correctness of protocol design and implementation. Nicely sort of creates three categories that I think a lot of the work we have in our mandates fits within. And now I want to kind of dive into each of these in just a little bit more detail so that we can break out what is actually within these categories. So I'll start with the maintenance piece. That is, of course, around the execution and implementation. So the day-to-day operations that you're familiar with, such as executive proposals, bug fixes, updates, expert consultation on system parameters, interactions like with the risk team, like with the collateral onboarding team. And here, the important piece is that failure is not an option. This is where the space grade code comes into it. And on the other side, we have growth, where you have innovation, new features, R&D. This is where we're talking about DSS Gov, the voting contract, instant access modules, delegation, incentivization, liquidations, and potentially down the line L2 solutions and other L1 blockchains. And there's not a clear divide between these two groups. There is a phasing from one to the other, such as liquidations will move into the maintenance phase as it gets deployed. But there is a change in mindset here where it is really about failing fast, experimenting, having ideas to put forward, prioritizing them and getting them into the day-to-day operations. And as you would have guessed, safety is the next one here, which is all around controls, standards, and processes that overarch the maintenance and the growth work that we have, including security and correctness, bytecode and game theory analysis and design, training and tooling, as well as formal methods to provide best-in-class assurance. And that is all around making sure that we have code as the last line of defense for everything that we push to the protocol. And again, there's no clear delineation between these groups at the moment, even though there is a slight difference in the mindset for innovation, for safety and security and maintenance. But all of them require communication with the community and awareness of what those different roles are and what the outcome and what the value of each of these is in terms of being delivered. So it's not done in isolation. These tasks are all done with other domain teams in mind and the broader community pipeline.
Derek, in terms of team size, it feels, or I don't know, I see Chris and Brian almost suffer every week with the amount of work that they need to do. And I see all this scope, which seems quite broad. And I don't know, potentially one could argue that you could have a specific team for each of the pillars, right? So do you think that this might be an issue in the future?
It has come up with the community, but at the moment, everything that we deploy has to have the rigor and testing around it that this team provides. So in the future down the line, potentially, yes, as we onboard more individuals, there is an opportunity to create a safety team, for lack of a better term, or a growth team that focuses specifically on layer 2 solutions and R&D, or the maintenance of what we put forward today. But at the moment, with the rigor and testing that we have, it goes through this team. So I'm just illustrating the breadth of work that is involved and also the different mindsets that exist in the team for what we deliver. So to your question around that, yeah, definitely in the future, I think as the protocol grows, as there are more collateral types, as there are more collateral adapters as a result, then yes, the focus will shift from perhaps more audits, less audits at different points in time, more focus on verification methods early on, and this will evolve over time. So yeah, just trying to illustrate the work and how that ties in with what I have here, the team mandates.
If I can jump in there, Derek. Yeah, you see Chris and I in the mandated actors calls and in the governance meetings because we're the ones that generally speak up. But I want to assure you that like everybody on the team, it's working just as hard. I think we all do want to get to a place where we've got these teams, and Derek alluded to that. But getting a dev to that point, we kind of have to seed and grow devs over time with the protocol. And I think the idea is that we would, once we have enough people with enough experience that we can safely kind of split the team, it would be more like a cellular division of the team into these other roles once we have the resources to do that.
Sounds good. Thank you. Long, I feel that you wanted to say something.
Yes, so I kind of noticed on your safety slide there, you mentioned kind of game theory, analysis, and design. And I guess I was just kind of curious if you kind of were kind of explicitly planning on hiring like an expert in game theory or mechanism design, or something? Because I think in my experience, that's kind of like a different skill set to kind of development work. I guess I feel like I've maybe felt that's potentially missing, like where we are now compared to maybe where we were, or like when MCD was designed and all this sort of stuff, right?
Yes, that's true. I'll let any of the guys that focus on formal verification if they want to jump in, but otherwise, yes, we are looking to hire in that space, and we are working as part of the budget. We have allocated resource for working with specific academics in that space. So I can jump into more on that if we want to, but there has been discussion that is different from a developer role, and it's a very specific focus. So yeah, I mean, it probably warrants a bit more discussion looking at the security roadmap that we're currently working on. So I wouldn't want to misrepresent that in any sort of short statements, but I know that Kurt and Tanner are working a lot on that at the moment. So in the coming weeks, we should definitely have something to share.
Yeah, and I just add, sorry.
Go ahead, Tanner, go for it.
All right. I just add that, yes, there are different skill sets, but this is often the case with sophisticated projects, that things are not just interdisciplinary, but multidisciplinary. And with smart contract engineering, every choice you make at the code level also has emergent effects at these higher levels of behavior. And so they really are quite integrated, and bad assumptions about the economics or incentive structure can lead to critical failures, right? So we see these as integral to safety, which is, as a result, integral to the core of the engineering process itself.
Thank you, Tanner.
Yeah, thanks both.
Cool, thanks guys. So yes, I just wanted to tie these concepts around maintenance, growth, and safety to the team mandates that we have at the moment. And I won't go into these in all the detail. They are in the MIP, and they're also in the PowerPoint notes that we'll share with everyone. But at a high level, walking through it, so security and safety, it's about reviewing and vetting all internal, external code. We're on pager duty for immediate security response with regards to community involvement. This is about education, training, tooling, promoting integrations with regards to collateral onboarding, so auditing tokens, building innovative collateral adapters, making sure we do technical assessments. The protocol evolution is looking at having new modules, exploring other L1 chains, exploring potentially new deployments, Euro, Swiss, etc. that I know a couple of the members have posted on the forum, which is really cool, as well as contract redesign, research and development. So this is very much like Tanner was saying around extending formal verification languages, potentially also contributing to the Ethereum roadmap, making sure that we are up to date on ecosystem changes, protocol maintenance, so making sure we have operational needs in place that we adapt to immediate risks. And on the tooling side, automation and infrastructure, so making sure we have developer tools, and we have READMEs in place, we have documentation in place to support our developer experience, and we also have or move towards decision assistance tooling that helps our developers on smart contract development. So this mandate is very broad, yes. And we've mentioned team size, we've mentioned the responsibility of the team, and I wanted to look at this. Okay, this is the team mandate at a high level, but what does this mean when we look at the backlog of work that we have? And this is not to say, well, there's a lot of work, which is pretty obvious. There is. Some of it's done, some of it's in process, and there's a lot of it to do. But the key thing here, I think, is making a value assessment and prioritizing that work. So this is, of course, not all about smart contracts. This is about smart contracts, risk, collateral onboarding, name a core unit, plus the community. We're all involved in this. So basically just showing that how we apply the theory and the mandates to what work exists in here. So the importance of prioritization is something that I wanted to convey by showing how much is on here, and some of it's within the community, some of it's within the team itself with regards to tooling and testing. These are not things you see, but that's where I want to sort of raise the bar in terms of communication and understanding of what we're working on in these different areas, so that there's a better understanding across domain teams and the community. Because yeah, there's a lot of work, but that's great. So we need to be able to prioritize it and hopefully get to it. So with that, I think I have, although Juan, you had a question?
No, I was going to ask if anyone had any questions or comments about that, but I think it's quite
I have a question.
open.
It has to do with the necessary time to train new team members. You spend, how long does it take before a new person is able to contribute? Is it like 3 months, 6 months, a year? I mean, how long does that take?
I mean, the general rule of thumb for most engineering positions is it takes about 6 months. I might argue that in this role, specifically with the Maker protocol, we need to bump that up to 9 months. I don't know how the others on the team feel about that, though.
Well, I'd say it a little bit more nuanced than that. It depends, of course, heavily on the extent of background of the person you're bringing on. Like if you hire someone who is, they've taken a boot camp or something in smart contracts and they know a little bit, yeah, it's probably going to take them, at least 6 months to sort of be fully up to speed on all the protocol details and such. If you hire someone with more background, they can be fully up to speed sooner. And as people ramp up and come online, they can get, expanded scope of tasks that they can take on and contribute to. So it's not that like somebody is totally useless for 6 months and then after 6 months they flip online and all of a sudden they're useful. It's that, the scope of what they can be entrusted with or tackle independently gradually grows over that time. I think it's worth calling out that there is a little bit of a tax on the team, right? Because you have to spend time mentoring and training and code reviewing and such. But it's well worth it because it pays off well in the long run. But that's also why retention is very important because there is that big investment in learning the nuances of the protocol and being able to get up to speed.
All right, thank you. I was just wondering that about that. I now more understand what you mean with retention, because it takes so long before you're able to productively use new team members. Okay, thank you.
Great, good question, thank you. So just summarizing some of the previous slides, I think we're well placed to deliver on these initiatives because of the combination of the philosophy and the values, how we interact with the community, the focus on these different areas that encompass our team mandates. But I also wanted to state the importance of recognizing the cross-team and community communication to assess the value of different priorities. And in doing so, make sure that we focus on that prioritized value as well, and then release safe and working code to extend the Maker protocol. Just as a little bit of a summary. And with that, I wanted to get on to, I think I had one last slide. So this is the one that will generate a bit of discussion. So with regards to team incentivization, so in MIP 40, I think you've all participated in comments. Thank you, everyone. And in that MIP, we requested a budget that includes team salaries as well as an MKR bonus. I won't go over the specifics of that unless we want to recap it, other than at a high level, the proposal includes coverage for 14 team members and is proposing to award 0.1% of existing MKR supply over 4 years. So for context there, the current burn is 34,000 MKR, and where 0.1% per person is 995 MKR over 4 years. So in the first year, that's 248 MKR, or 25%. And the total allocation over 4 years is 13,000 MKR. Again, emphasis there on over 4 years. And because this is dependent on whether an individual remains in the team and whether the team remains voted in by governance as a core unit. So some of the areas that I just thought I would raise for the discussion was why did I present such a proposal? Well, demand for the smart contract developers makes for a very competitive marketplace among DeFi competitors and top tier tech companies. The vesting compensation package is a known pattern amongst Silicon Valley companies, and they all reflect a competitive equity-based vesting over multiple years. So I've tried to reflect that in this model. Compensation as a long-term incentive is best tied to the success of MKR, not cash. This is my view based on what I've seen in the industry, because dollars themselves are not aligned to the protocol success. Again, the emphasis over the long term is something that I saw. So I wanted to capture that in an absolute value of MKR. And I'm aware that that comes with different discussion points. So despite the built up skill set, I thought it's also worth mentioning that it's very unlikely that individuals will stay in a role or such a role for 4 years. So we really want to incentivize their ongoing value add over that time. Yes, because of the absolute MKR number, team members are exposed to both the upside and the downside of MKR price movements. So in doing so, we're tying the protocol success or downfall to the team reward as a result. So I thought I would interpret some of the community discussion so far. So you may agree or disagree with this, but it felt like in the discussion that there was agreement towards teams receiving MKR because it's the best mechanism to align the work of the team to the MKR price movement and protocol success. It didn't, however, feel like we were agreed as a community with regards to being unified on whether tokens should be minted or bought. What is the process and mechanism here? That still seemed to be up for discussion. And I'm not sure if that's something we have time to discuss here today or tomorrow is a focus point, but I thought it should be raised. And I did say here that, yeah, a dollar value is less effective than an MKR value in that long-term tying protocol success to team reward method or way of thinking. So yes, I left some questions on here to sort of spawn the discussion. So how do we grow the team in following years as determined by protocol demand? So yeah, growing the team, and as you've seen, there's a lot of work. That work will be relative to risk. So I would imagine that MKR vesting in future for future people coming into the program will be less due to the reduced risk over time as the protocol grows. So do we, and if so, how do we scale such a discussion with other teams? Can there be a framework? I think that's a really good question that came up in the chat, and I think there is value in that because ultimately every team should have some tied incentive to MKR and the success of the protocol going forward. Is it feasible to build performance measures within the team or across teams? That's another question that was coming up. It's difficult to do so, which is why I've stayed close to having an absolute MKR value to tie in that appreciation or depreciation over time, again, tying protocol success to the team. And a recent question that came up was, what if we diverted a portion of the burn towards incentivization? That introduces some uncertainty, but it's a question that was asked, so I thought I would record it here for us to talk more about if we want to. But yeah, so that's the end of the slides that I had. So feel free to ask questions, everyone.
There, regarding this, and I know that there are going to be a lot of comments, but does this mean that if there were 100 developers joining and staying for 4 years, we would dilute Maker by 10%? Am I right in that?
So we are only proposing to grow the team by 5 individuals for the next year.
No, I know. But I mean, if there were 100 people that were into this program of vesting, just to have a round number, because it's 0.1% of the existing Maker supply, if those 100 people stayed for 4 years, would we dilute Maker by 10%?
Well, I think you have to ask what is the value of those individuals compared to the smart contract team. I think we're saying that there's diminishing returns if you sort of go beyond the number we've proposed, and I don't think that it would make sense to grow beyond that. Now, if we're talking about other teams, those other teams have different value propositions which they will have to substantiate and put forward that I think are absolutely warranted, but that will be something that they'll have to put forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think that every team should be getting as much as the developers, since it's same as the salary, right? You get what the industry gives you. Sorry,
demand.
Just for the straight math one, yes, the answer is if we use the mint function to basically, try and give 100 people 0.1%, then over 4 years it would dilute MKR, or you'd kind of dilute the MKR probably right up front. You'd stick it in a vesting contract, and so that 10% would get trickled into the market during vesting. But yeah, that's what a burn would look like if
yeah,
we were
thanks.
That's what
that was my question.
Like.
I was hearing a lot of concerns from a lot of people saying like, yeah, but we don't like minting, we're not a fan of this, or we could have used this other mechanism. And at the end of the day, I feel that not everyone is going to get 0.1%, and also not everyone is going to take 4 years. So it feels like it's something fair. But
to be completely honest, the only person on the team that has been here for 4 years is Gonzalo. So there's smart contracts has the highest turnover, I think, of any other team as well. So I wouldn't expect that this is all going to get paid out, or maybe even most of it.
Yeah, I think the point is that, like, if it's 10% over 4 years, that's like 2.5% per year, which is like not really that much, and that's assuming that we burn like nothing, and it's assuming that we have 100 people that are getting 0.1%. So I guess the point is maybe that the magnitudes aren't like huge, right?
Yeah, they look kind of big in raw numbers, but then just consider that unless we do really good at retention, and frankly, like if someone's been working on this protocol as a smart contract developer for 4 years, like I think we should just be shoveling money at them. Yes, they're worth it.
Another thing to consider besides the amortization over time and the relative values, right, is that it won't be like everyone who joins in perpetuity always gets 0.1%, right? If someone, right, if after a year we hire and a couple more smart contract developers, I think the proposal right now that they'd get proration, like at 3 out of the 4 years, or maybe by that point there would have been a renegotiated sort of like starting agreement. So it's not necessarily a commitment in perpetuity that everybody who joins is going to get 0.1% of MKR forever whenever they join.
It's maybe a little bit off topic, but from a governance perspective, I'd actually be pretty happy if everyone who was involved got like 0.1% over 4 years, because that's quite good at distributing governance power.
I had a question about the 4 years. So it sounds like we were talking about how almost like not a lot go into the 4 years. So how did you guys get to 4 versus like 3 or or 5 or something?
So when I looked at vesting packages for Silicon Valley companies like Facebook and others, I was seeing packages that were ranging from 2 to 3 years. And I wanted to extend that because A, it's unlikely people stay that long. But B, if they do stay that long, we really want to keep them engaged and involved with an incentive. So that was partly where 4 years came from. And yeah, when Chris and I were talking it over, that sort of seemed to be the number we settled on. It seemed to be part of the standard sort of Series C vesting level as well. So it's kind of fits with the industry pattern. Because so I mean, if we let's look shorter and longer to sort of put that number into perspective. If we look shorter, then I really think, let's say 1 year or 2 year. I think it's too short because you're incentivizing people to get modules out the door. We sort of cut corners. We don't do the formal verification, which takes months, and then we sort of push things out because we want to get a reward, right? So we want to stop doing that. So 2 years was kind of felt a bit short, even in crypto, I know, but it didn't feel like we were building up, because then you'd look at, okay, maybe rewards should be offered on a half-year basis, or every 2 quarters offer a reward just felt too short. So I wanted to stretch it out because I don't want team churn, and I want to keep people engaged for a longer period of time, essentially, was kind of where that 4 came from.
Are you thinking about any type of cliff, Derek?
Yeah, so that's the 1 year really, which it's 25% at the end of the first year, so 248 MKR. We have that same 25% over the 4 years. Is just how it worked out. There has been community discussion for, well, should you stagger it towards the end of that, or should you bring it forward? Typically, you bring the cliff forward, which is higher, but I didn't want to introduce an incentivization to, okay, work a year and then bail. I want to spread that opportunity over those 4 years. So that's kind of where I landed there.
So I would actually say that, so I think the 1 year cliff makes sense, right? Because you don't want people kind of just bailing in less than that time. But I'd maybe consider making the subsequent cliffs more of like a continuous scale rather than like cliffs. Because like, it kind of sucks to be sort of stuck in a job that you don't like for like an extra 6 months because you're waiting for some vesting cliff, or like vice versa. If you do decide to leave, it feels kind of bad if you're like, you know, if you leave after 6 months and then you get like none of the vesting, right? Mm-hmm. Like I don't love the idea of like golden handcuffs, right? In general, especially like past the first year. Like sure, in the first year maybe someone's not, you know, someone maybe takes the piss, but like once you've had someone for a year, I feel like you should maybe just do away with cliffs. But that's a personal thing for me. But
okay, so I guess 2 questions there. So are you seeing? Give me an example of the incentive numbers at sort of year 2, 3, 4. Are you seeing an increase or a decrease?
So I would just say that, so after the first year, there's like a cliff of like 20.25%. And then it's just like a continuous like line up to 4 years, right? So like if you say like 1 year and 1 week, then you get 1 week's extra maker of the vesting set. And you say an extra 6 months, you get 6 months vest, right? Rather than, yeah, so like a streaming, like kind of streaming vesting rather than like cliffs after the first year is what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay. I think that's fine. And I know with Brian, we spoke about this, that would be possible to introduce. So I can possibly add, I can definitely add some more detail around what that may look like as a post beyond 1 year. But yeah, okay. That makes sense. Let me think about that a bit more and I'll get back to you on that.
So Derek, there is a prototype for DSS Vest. It's not complete, and it needs things like a cliff to be added to it. But it basically streams after a certain point. So the recipient can basically collect and choose their taxable event at any time, and the amount is just based on time past the the checkpoint. But the team would need to go over that. It's technically feasible in the current paradigm. Something like Sablier, which got mentioned in the sidebar, that would involve having the maker up front. So yeah, like if the goal was to mint, then they would have to be minted up front and then put into the Sablier stream. And I think there's only like a 1-year limit, maybe, in Sablier. So there's that issue as well.
Okay. Right.
I mean, potentially minting, if it's going to be locked, shouldn't cause a huge impact on the price. So yeah. I don't know if there are any more questions. Maybe Andrew wants to say something, since he seems to be very vocal on the chat.
And Andrews feels very, it looks like down about minting as opposed to maybe like siphoning the burn. And maybe Andrew, you want to say something?
We can maybe mint if like the minting cannot be unlocked until we've burned a certain amount. But I'm generally very anti-mint after seeing what happened with Wi-Fi, and like they if I remember correctly, they had voted to burn their keys to mint, and then never burned them, and then there was a whole discussion about minting some Wi-Fi to compensate their devs and do all sorts of necessary things. There was a lot of pushback, but then everyone sort of was like, well, we can mint for ourselves, and then they all voted to allow a mint, and then the whole distribution got all screwed up. And I just see it, I think like having that button, like the printer button just there, it's very tempting, and can just lead to just unintended consequences that I think are dangerous. And I think if we're gonna allow minting, like we need to have very, very strict, like codified, I don't know how it would be codified, but codified like limits on how it can be minted. So if it mint for everyone, it actually be sensible if we want to. I mean, yeah, I really am much more pro like taking it from the burn. If we need to mint ahead of time, but it could only be unlocked like once we've burned enough, maybe that's okay. I don't know how the mechanics would work. But yeah, I'm very in favor of like hefty compensation packages for the devs. And I think that like significant amounts of makers should be allocated for them to retain talent. But I'm very cautious about traveling down the minting path, because I think that it's a very slippery slope that can lead to unintended problems.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. So one of the concerns that we had about that is just the fact that we actually aren't minting right now, right? We're making a lot of money, but every time we get to the point where we're burning, we raise the surplus buffer, which admittedly we all agree we need to do. But then just relying on actual burns to start reallocating governance weight is maybe not the best solution. Now the system is already like configured to mint. So if governance makes bad decisions, right, we lose our surplus buffer and we start minting collateral. So it's not unprecedented, right? We already do it to recover the system.
Yeah, so that minting I'm fully for, and like that should be like one of the like very strict cases where we are allowed to mint to bail out the system when we're under collateralized, and we did that Black Thursday, and that's like a case where we have to mint, right? That's a very like concrete example of what it being necessary, right? But other cases for minting are not like necessarily clear that we should go down that path. So I think that we do need to definitely keep up the minting function, because that's how Maker operates. We do need it to bail out DAI if it's under collateralized. But for
Andrew, I'm interested in knowing why you're for minting a little bit for the security or for covering the losses, and you're not for the minting for growing the protocol and attracting talent.
Yeah, I'm for minting. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm for minting for bailing out the protocol. I'm anti-minting for attracting more talent and all those other like growth sort of initiatives, because I think that is a slippery slope. The minting to bail out the system is like a necessary feature of Maker, but minting to incentivize, it can get out of hand in ways that we probably can't foresee necessarily. And I think Wi-Fi was like a good example of what can go wrong with it.
So doesn't this come down to the governance community? Like, I think the concern is around, like, we need to have rigor and rules around how we decide to mint MKR and what quantity, which is what we're discussing here. So that's cool. Is the concern that governance may approve something that it shouldn't?
Yeah.
And how do we stop that?
And also, like, we're all here today, right? But like, fast forward 10 years, is it the same people? Maybe they have different motives. Like, can the system, like, be robust in that? Yeah.
So I'm going to say a couple of things here. Like, one, we can't there's basically no way we can kind of lock governance out of minting rights. Like governance kind of has power over the whole thing. It's really difficult to remove that power, like in a way that governance can't undo. In fact, it might just be impossible, other than just like actually burning it and making it permanent, right? So the question I would ask is like, consider this a situation where like, some bad thing happens in the market, right? Like the surplus buffer gets drained, we mint some Maker to recapitalize, and then at the end of the month we need to pay core units. Because like in that situation, we are minting Maker to pay core units, because otherwise the entire protocol collapses, right? Because there's going to be no one working for it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, if you accept that like you're going to need, like you may in some cases need to mint Maker to pay for like salaries, then maybe that's not that different from paying like, like MKR for incentives and for investing and this sort of stuff, right?
I can see how that's
in 10 years, right? If the governance landscape has changed, governance is still Maker token holders. So the governance landscape will have changed either to represent and be the people who were the beneficiaries over that period, or if they're if you're still concerned about the Maker protocol, you will also be part of that community as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also buyback and distribute, right? It's not entirely this binary argument, I think. And I believe this is actually slotted for tomorrow's governance call anyway. So I don't think it's like we just make the decision now.
I think our burner, like we can't really intercept the Maker that's going into that. So if we were to take, say, a buyback and distribute principle, we would either be like taking that to markets and probably getting front run by everybody that sees us talking about it and going there, or we would say burn 5 Maker in an auction, and then we would immediately mint it again out the other side to distribute. So
that could be okay.
Yeah. So the only downside, I think the trade-off, right, of between like mint and, because again, it's not a downside. It's like depends on your perspective, I guess, right? So with the mint, you are very competitive for compensation, right? So we can essentially say to somebody, you're getting this absolute amount of MKR, and you're sort of incentive aligned with that amount of MKR. It's like if you perform poorly over that number of years, your MKR goes to 0, and if you perform really well, it might 10x, and all of us wanted 10x, right? So, so you're really well goal aligned, and your MKR doesn't change based on the performance of the protocol. If we siphon off of the burn, then in 4 years, like we may just be getting like this like pittance of a trickle, like one what we like to call a Conti of MKR, right? Like one way of MKR ends up being your distribution. So that's the sort of trade-off, right? And then how competitive is that against? And I agree, maybe the Wi-Fi direction was not great, but how competitive is that against like a series of protocols that are just willing to mint tokens to compensate devs, right? So that's, I think, what we need to take under consideration.
I want to add something to that, Chris. Potentially, using the burning function is going to, so you're incentivizing people to burn a lot. So maybe they will say, okay, we should not research L2, we should onboard more tokens because that's what's burning more, so we'll receive our maker, compared to potentially growing it more in the long term and suffer from the vesting during those months. I don't know if we want that.
So I have one other thought. I mean, I wrote a comment earlier. So like maybe at the onset of the formation of a team, you would set aside the maker, and like how that would happen, I guess, from the burn somehow. But I guess you'd have to accumulate that maker somehow, and then there would be like a defined amount of maker, which is, which was bought up around these prices, or I mean maybe burnt and minted at the same time, and set aside at these prices, and then that will be distributed over over the vesting schedule. Yeah, I don't know.
We were thinking every year that you would probably reassess what the compensation or the incentive compensation portion of the package would look like, and then it's not 0.1%. It's it's less and less and less over time, but hopefully in monetary terms that's still like enough to incentivize people to join. That's kind of how you go now, right? If you're just a Series A to a Series C, you get a lot right up front. You get down to this like 10% number around the like B, C stage. So,
actually, one of the question I actually brought up, the foundation treasury. I don't know if this is open for people to discuss, but I believe there's some maker left in there, maybe even a decent chunk. What are the plans for that once the foundation dissolves, and can that maker be used as an incentive for developers and stuff? Because that's not minting.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I mean, we can all see on Etherscan what that amount is. I just can't remember exactly, but I mean, yes, that is there. I don't know what the foundation's going to do with that. They will have to reply on that topic. But I think we should, regardless of that, we should act as if that doesn't exist, because what we're doing is longer term than that amount of MKR. And this should be, a model that works beyond, next year, the year after, as we scale.
Yeah. I mean, so another interesting question is like, assuming that the maker treasury all gets burned, which is obviously not guaranteed, like, are you then feeling better about minting because we're so much lower than we started with?
I would feel good to mint up until that amount.
So is that maybe saying that we're just happy to mint when we're below like 1 million MKR? Is that like the conclusion there?
Well, not necessarily the 1 million, right? Because if we have a liquidity crisis and need to mint to 1.2 or for something, some example like that, right?
That'll happen obviously automatically, yeah. But I mean more like for incentives, like, are we happy at minting if we're just below the 1 million, right?
Yeah, as long as we're not inflating with the minting, and not like minting more than we are burning it in revenue over time somehow. And if we do burn the entire treasury, then I mean, I don't see why we can't mint up until that amount, and you've reserved that for similar things that the treasury was doing with it before, which would be like, incentivizing partnerships and investing foundation members. And that can be just like a treasury that the DAO owns for these purposes, right? And I think the number was high enough where it can be allocated quite effectively for many years, and plenty of room for incentives.
Yeah, I don't know what the foundation's intention is, and I can't speak on behalf of the foundation with regard to that. Like, from our perspective, like, if the foundation were to donate or burn some amount of that, I think we'd be fine taking that out of this. But as Derek said, right, like, what happens in the future when that's gone? How do we continue to operate?
How do you continue to vest people long after the treasury is burnt, and revenue doesn't necessarily outpace?
Yeah, you just adjust the 0.1% number downward over the years, and you make it look attractive over the course of a 4-year period. And I think that we'll be able to move forward in perpetuity that way. Yeah, I mean, there's also lots of companies don't just give you one grant, right? Like you end up with like grants and then you kind of keep that rolling and that's your golden handcuffs, right? Nobody wants to leave because they lose their grants. So
that's actually kind of an interesting, we're maybe running out of time, so apologies. But that's kind of another interesting point, right? Like assuming you have like, you know, the kind of 1 in 100 dev who decides like make a protocol, it's where they want to be, right? They just like decide that this is it. And then like after 4 years, we then stop rewarding them, even though if they're planning to stay for like 10 years. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
I commented above. I think that like, you know, like I'm not opposed to like a vesting schedule that could be like endless. I guess kind of like the grants thing you mentioned, where like, you know, maybe it goes on some emissions curve of some kind where like you get, you know, less each year, you know, adjusted down, but like something to continue working for, you know, as time moves forward.
Going back
Can
to
I
your
ask,
comment, Long. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this has to do with the coordination. You said on these slides you coordinated with the other groups. Is this in some way coordinated with the Oracle's team? Because after you, there will be an Oracle's core unit, I guess. And me as a community member, what I really don't want is for you to get package ABC something, and then the Oracle teams come out with their proposal, and what they propose tops everything you got, and that's not going to be optimal. So, is this reasonably coordinated with the Oracle's team?
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Derek. I'll let you.
Well, so we've discussed it at a high level. I mean, everyone is aware and everyone's looking at this team to sort of start the discussion on what does this look like going forward. I don't have a model for what the framework overall looks like. So in short, I mean, that discussion still has to happen. We know that the Oracle's team are going to have a very high cost due to maintaining the oracles going forward. So, you know, what that looks like in comparison to us, I don't know with regards to MKR yet.
yeah, so I just want to follow up and say that's kind of my main concern at this stage as well, and that is that either we'll get into a situation where like, you know, governance is feeling like they have to kind of pay out all these small vesting things because the first one was 0.1% and now they're all that, right? Or I don't want to get into a situation where, you know, the next coordinator comes along and says like, we want more or we want less. And then like 1 year and a half down the line, they're feeling either, or someone is feeling dissatisfied with the amount of vesting they're getting in comparison to some other core team. And to some extent, right, that's going to be unavoidable. But like, I feel like maybe if we have some sort of more global or like sort of kind of system or like setup that kind of covers multiple teams, maybe that's beneficial.
Yeah, that could be interesting if, say, a smart contract dev wants to move to the Oracle's team or vice versa. Like that's got to be worked out too, right? Do you start over? Or...
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff like that which will either come up as we get to it, or we should try and figure out, right?
Along with that in mind, what are our timelines around this? I mean, I know we're in RFC now. I know there's a cutoff period before the formal submission. When exactly is that, so that we have things in a row?
So there's a frozen period of 2 weeks in which you shouldn't make any changes to the content. You can kind of like clarify it or make it. And before that, the whole thing should be 1 month. So not before, but it could overlap. It should be 1 month in RFC. So potentially you could formally submit it 1 month after the RFC submission if you haven't changed anything in the last 2 weeks.
So I think that would make that the 24th for next month. So one thing you could potentially do as well is separate out the vesting part from the salaried part, right? And so I know obviously you guys are all sort of very keen on this for good reasons. So you could potentially put in some clause that says like the vesting schedules will be backdated to the date of this starting, right? Of like the regular budget passing. It's kind of tricky because I don't know how long it's going to take the DAO to figure out some more global thing. So, and obviously I don't want to kind of string you guys along or like the DAO to string you guys along. So yeah, I don't know. There's some options we would maybe need to discuss. Yeah, I don't know what makes the most sense off the top of my head.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all part of a bigger. Yeah, cool. Okay.
I don't know if there are any comments. Maybe Tanner, sorry for putting you on the spot, but you can comment what you said on the chat regarding the game theory, so it's recorded for posteriority, or maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, let me see. Are you talking about what I said about?
You mentioned that you know people. Yes.
Oh, okay, that one. Yeah. So I work closely with the token engineering community, which is kind of an emerging discipline that combines game theory and mechanism design and economics and systems engineering principles, cyber physical systems to design more robust protocols, because of the fact that, especially with all of these composability issues, there's a lot of emergent behaviors and dynamics in the network. So there's a growing pool of talent and experts in this particular niche that we could certainly look to for bringing people who are more specialized in that into the team if needed.
That's great. All right, Chris, you're it.
Yeah. One word to bring up. Oh, are you guys cutting out of me? No, I still got you. Yeah, it's basically I just wanted to make sure it was sort of clear to everybody that our team is hoping to act autonomously when it comes to sort of hiring and firing, and we're hoping to sort of allow people a bit of an anonymity shield on their like personal finances and whatnot. And so we're hoping that like the sort of team satisfaction or dissatisfaction can be expressed, by MKR holders directly at the team, but that the sort of minutia of like individual compensation packages and performance and whatnot would be handled by our team. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was sort of clear. I actually didn't get this far in the discussion, but I wasn't sure if people were like starting to dig down and like look into individuals on the team, and that makes my job really hard to do, trying to like find people and sell them on this idea of working for a DAO. I don't think anybody wants to be under the microscope of like an entire DAO when their compensation is either for safety reasons or other reasons, when their compensation is being discussed. So if we can, I just want to make sure we, scope this to talking at the team level. So I'd appreciate that if we all stuck to that.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments before we call it today?
Yeah, I got one quick question. I heard Derek say something about possibly looking at layer ones in the near future, and I was wondering if your team was well versed when it comes to working with Rust, Viper, Wasm, etc. And yeah, how does that look? Is that a 2024 event, or is that something that maybe can come a little earlier, like 2023?
So with regards to the technical side of it, Chris and others, I'll let you guys answer that. But with regards to the prioritization of that work, I think this is where we start having a really, really interesting discussion with the community going, here are all the things, let's line them up. Let's talk about the value. Let's see what opportunity is it going to give us as a protocol, and what does that mean for DAI? What does that mean for protocol security? What does that mean for runoff risks to other parts of the protocol, and then stand them all up and see what makes the most sense. So yeah, in short, I think that's a really interesting prioritization exercise that I can't wait to get into. But it'll have to stand up against everything else we have on the board. From a technical perspective, Chris and Brian, others, I'll let you guys take that bit.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, like, from a technical perspective, like almost everybody on the team probably learned Solidity sometime in the last 3 years. I think good engineers are adaptable and can learn different languages. I myself started out in C doing kernel programming. I've gone through C, C++, like, you know, all the way up into the higher level languages. At this point, I probably know more programming languages than I don't know programming languages. So, you know, we will have to like learn these things as they come up. The downside right now is obviously like when we're super flat out and working very hard on these projects, there's almost no time for like R&D and learning new things. And that's the situation we want to move our dev team away from. We want to be able to like make sure that if we're going to have those resources that we, you know, successfully employ them and like give people a chance to learn. I can't even read all the forum stuff at this point. I've stopped reading a lot of the like F security community stuff and the F research stuff. So I'm not up to speed on the EIPs at this point, just because we've been on such a thin staff over the last like 6 months that all we can do is just, you know, is just like keep the protocol moving every day. So there'll be a strategy on allowing us to sort of, you know, take a more R&D perspective at some point. But I don't know if anyone else has anything to add about, you know, evaluating like other layer 1s, layer 2s, other languages, technical capabilities, but feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, I think, you know, adaptability and the ability to keep learning new things is, you know, one of the hallmark requirements for being a competent dev at all, because if you don't keep learning, everything in software moves so fast, you just get left behind anyway. So, you know, continuous learning and improvement is like a core part of the software engineer skill set. You know, that said, we only have so much bandwidth, so we'll have to be smart about how we spend resources within the team on R&D or learning tasks versus actual execution. But, you know, no matter how many people you hire, they'll have to stay up to date with the latest state of the art and that sort of thing.
Thank you, everyone. So Derek, where people find you, potentially give out your address if they want to go with the pitchforks.
Derek.flossman on Rocket Chat, Derek at makerdao.com on email, and pretty much Derek.flossman on the internet. So you'll find me out there.
That's good. Big thanks to the rest of the smart contracts team for coming and answering all our questions. And yeah, this Friday we have Sebastian Derivo doing real world finance. That's going, well, it's actually, the vote is happening right now. I believe it finishes on Monday. Next Wednesday we'll have Seth that will present content production. So very interesting core unit presentations coming up. So yeah, keep tuned and let's keep the discussion going in the forum. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.